Hello! Welcome back to the Docentric Advanced Functional Training series. In this video, we will describe how to configure the additional email attachments. What is happening when a standard or Docentric email print destination is used for printing a report? A report is created, usually as a PDF document, an email message is also created, and the report document is attached to the email message. Docentric email print destination gives you a possibility to specify the additional files that will be attached to the email message. For example, terms and conditions, legal documents, agreements, contracts, specification, images, charges, receipts, and so on. If such documents are under the D365 F&O document management, Docentric is able to access them in runtime and add them as additional attachments. Some of these documents, like terms and conditions and legal documents, aren't report-specific. Therefore, they can be linked to some common record type, such as legal entity. There is another group of documents that are report-specific, for example, agreement or contract attached to the customer or vendor, specification and images attached to items, charges, receipts attached to the project invoice transactions, and so on. To set up the additional attachments, we need to specify on which record to look for the document management attachments. We do it by configuring the additional attachment rules found on the Docentric email print destination. I have here configured several different rules. The first field in them, Load From, tells on which record type to search for the document management attachments. The next several fields, up to and including the Tags field, are there to provide the filtering conditions. There might be many different document management attachments on each of these record types, but only the attachments that match the filter criteria will be added to the email. Let's start with the Load From field. There are more possibilities than we currently see here, but let's start with these. Global attachments would mean the attachments that are globally available, regardless of the report or document being printed. A good place for that is the current legal entity. Let's check the current legal entity and see what is available there. I have two attachments here, both with the same description, terms and conditions, but one of them is in Microsoft Word format and has internal restriction, while another is a PDF format and has external restriction. It becomes clear that it isn't enough to point to the record from which to take the attachments, but we also need a way to filter the available attachments. Some conditions we can use for filtering are, for example, the description, restriction, file name, and file type. But that isn't enough. That's why we have added the Docentric Settings Fast tab with some fields that allow for even finer filtering. The most intuitive ones are Category and Tags. We can also specify the report runtime language to match and the activity period. The global attachment flag can be found only on the legal entity attachments. We anticipate that companies might have many attachments on the legal entities, so only the attachments having this flag set will be considered for the additional email attachments. Back to our additional attachment rules. Current legal entity is known, so the lookup under the attachment description will list all the available attachments on it, but only the ones having that global attachment flag set. We see also the category, file type, document type, restriction, language, and tags. They relate to the fields we have seen on the document attachment form. Empty fields, both internal and external restriction and any language, mean that no filtering by that property is applied. In this first rule, we have pointed to the document we want to add because it is known and accessible in the moment of configuration. If not found field can have the following values. For example, terms and conditions are important and I don't want to send this report without them. So if maybe someone has deleted that attachment and it isn't available when the report is printed, I want to cancel the printing and raise an error. For some other attachments, like here below, I might decide to continue printing with or without warning. If we move further to the right, there is one more interesting field, display name. It specifies how the attachment will be named when we add it as the email message attachment. This placeholder, original description, means that we will use the original description as we see it in the attachment. We can use the placeholders from this helper menu item, and we see the first two placeholders to be the original description and original file name, while the others are a combination of report-specific and standard placeholders. I have added the suffix from legal entity to the original description placeholder so that we can recognize this attachment when it is added to the email message. Let's check the next rule. Its load from is source table. As we discussed in some of the previous tutorials, in our terminology, source table is the record type that, by posting, generates the journal. In case of sales invoice, its source is the related sales order, and, for example, in case of purchase order confirmation, the source table is purchase order. We can see that in the instructions here below. Because this is the setup for the sales invoice, source table would be the related sales order. Let's look at one sales invoice and its related sales order and the document management attachments on it. This is the sales order, its header, and here are its attachments. I have only one attachment, and if I don't apply any additional filtering, it will be added to the email. Let's go back to the sales order. While we are here, we can check the attachments we have on the lines. On the first line, there are two attachments. First one doesn't have anything specific, and the second one has external restriction and the sales category. Right now, we don't have any rule for the sales order lines attachments, so let's add it. I will go back to the additional attachment rules and add a new rule. Under the load from lookup, we see all the supported record types. We already explained the global attachments and source table. Source table lines are logically the lines on the source table. In this case, it would be sales order lines. Account table is the related customer or vendor if applicable for a given report. Journal and journal lines are self-explanatory, and in the case of sales invoice, they would mean the sales invoice journal and its lines. Items are the items on the journal lines. Context record is the report execution context record, and it usually maps to the source table or journal. In the reports supported by Docentric replicas, it is always set to the source table. And finally, custom record and custom records are there if none of the above record types suits your needs. You will need some development to point to the record where Docentric should search for the attachments, but you would still benefit from all these filtering conditions. I said that I wanted to configure the attachments from the sales order lines, therefore I will select the source table lines here. I will select the sales category to get only that one attachment from all the lines, and I will add the suffix from sales order lines so that we recognize the attachments resulting from this rule. I can define the order in which the attachments from this source would appear on the email, so I will shift this record up 2 times so that it appears immediately below the source table. We also have these 2 rules to take all the attachments from the account table, which means from the customer, and from the items. Let's quickly check them. Before I print this invoice and see all of these attachments added to the email, I will first close the attachment rules form and make sure that the open email before sending flag is set. Then I will save this print management setting by closing this print destination form and selecting some other print management setup. Now to the invoices, and let's print this one. Alright, this is the result. There are many attachments here. First, there is the attachment we explicitly selected from the legal entity, our terms and conditions. Then there is one attachment from the sales order header. Next, just one attachment from the sales order lines, because remember how we filtered them by the sales category. We have these two attachments from the customer and several attachments from the items. We could have used, for example, the categories, restrictions, or tags to refine the result. For example, if I say that only the items attachments having the specification category should be taken, and save this new setting, and print again, there are now only two attachments coming from the items. When you are configuring your attachment rules, remember this trick with adding the suffix to the attachment name, at least until you get the result you need. If you're not sure which rule to apply, we recommend that you add all of them except for the global attachments and the custom record and records. Use the suffix that tells you from which record type the attachment came, and print the report with the option to open email before sending, as I did for this video. Resulting email will clearly tell you the correct setup. I would also recommend checking our how-to manual about the additional email attachments. It has the reference section for commonly used reports, where you can see which table will be resolved based on the different load from selection. A special challenge here is the project invoice, where you should know that source table is a project invoice proposal. In this tutorial, we learned that the candidates for the additional email attachments are the D365 F&O document management attachments. We saw how to configure the rules for specifying the records on which the Centric should search for the attachments. And we also learned how to filter the available attachments.